Who is telling the truth about the notorious Belmont High School? Do the 1,000 closed oil wells beneath the new buildings really pose a threat to the children's safety? Or is this just hysteria whipped up by labor union zealots? Or was it poor oversight by the LAUSD? Or was it criminal misconduct on the part of the developers and the contractors? Stay tuned. The site itself, with 1,000 oil wells on it, is this something that's usually considered for development of a school site?
Generally, schools are never built on a site that has had contamination on it, or either through pesticides or oil or any other type of contamination. It is just not allowed.
Would you describe the hazards, if you found any, on that particular site?
Well, the first time that we visited the site, we visited it with District Attorney Cooley, and there was almost a complete task force present that day. It was during the rainy part of the season, and we noticed a tremendous amount of puddles on site where there were gases bubbling up through the water ponds, and in some cases you could even smell the odor of I call rotten eggs, which is probably from hydrogen sulfide.
You were just telling us about hydrogen sulfide and about it being dangerous, and that the state has more stringent laws regulating hydrogen sulfide than even the federal government. Yet we have a copy here of the district attorney's investigative report that he released after the investigation was finished. And he told us on this program that basically that the conditions were natural conditions, and therefore they were not something that could be prosecuted as an oversight. How do you see it?
Hydrogen sulfide is considered a broad-spectrum poison, meaning it can poison several different systems in the body. Breathing very high levels of hydrogen sulfide can cause death within a few breaths. There could be loss of consciousness and after one or more breaths.
So in your estimation, if the school is built and it still has the presence of hydrogen sulfide, is that a violation of state law?
Yes, it's a violation of state and federal law.
Now, is it dangerous to children?
It's extremely dangerous to children, and one of the reasons that it is that it tends to be hang low towards the ground, and children being shorter in stature are more likely to breathe in fumes from it.
Now, what would you recommend to your client if you were asked to evaluate a site such as this for a school?
I would have suggested that the site not be used for a school. As we went through the process of interviewing and looking at documents, we found there were a number of consultants that questioned things, and when they questioned things, they were removed as consultants. The school district just seemed to find somebody that would write them the report that they wanted.
Is it possible that this site could be remediated, do you think?
Well, the site, of course, could be remediated. Anything can be done for money. It doesn't necessarily mean that it can be done quickly or cost effectively. My concern on this site would be that it would be a very expensive process, and I think we've already seen a number of $107 million to remediate it. But I'm not sure that covers the cost of ensuring that the gases don't come up into that school. I've seen a proposal while we were on the task force of putting a passive active system in it. Those are very expensive. Should have been started and done before the buildings were built, but nonetheless very expensive, and the maintenance on them is extremely high. Very frankly, I think that site should be a park. I don't think that site should ever have anything built on it that the public deals with, or that a school certainly would be built on. In reading this report after it was written, I see that children are the primary concern of the district attorney's office. Well, if that's true, then there should be a recommendation from the district attorney's office, or at least from the task force, saying we don't believe that children should be subjected to such a danger. It's a dangerous situation, and frankly, I don't understand why anybody would ever want to pose such a risk.
So the district attorney put out a report basically saying there was no laws violated.
Throughout his report, it says that.
Throughout. But you would take exception with that?
Well, I think there's clearly some environmental issues. On the construction side, I think there are some extremely clear issues that work was invoiced and billed for that was not done and performed. I think there's clearly some, if not criminal wrongdoing, it certainly is civil wrongdoing.
Well, on the Belmont site, does the fact that the contaminated soil and the waste pit oils and the drilling muds were removed from the site without an EPA manifest indicate that there was a criminal violation of the health and safety code? And do they ever enforce that?
Oh, absolutely. To move hazardous material, knowingly or unknowingly, from a site and dispose of it on another site is a violation of the law.
Do you feel, was it a crime or was it incompetence that we're talking about here?
Well, I think many times incompetence leads to crime. I think it could be a combination of things. There clearly, in my opinion, is some environmental violations, and there are clear federal and state violations of stuff that was done on the site.
Who do you think was responsible? Whether it was a criminal and incompetence, or one or both, can you give us an idea? Was it the school administrators that were the planners and the developers, or was it the developers, the contractors? Who was responsible?
Well, I think ultimately the buck has to stop at the school district.
You were just telling us that the school district bears much of the blame for the disaster that's happened on Belmont by making bad decisions or being incompetent. Weren't they getting advice? Weren't they getting professional advice to tell them what was best to do?
Well, they got a lot of advice. They got a lot of reports. If they didn't like the report, as I said previously, it appeared to me that they found somebody that would write them the report that they wanted. Sometimes they just overlooked it and ignored it. To me, the catch point in this whole thing was when they got the very first phase one and said, this is an oil-filled site, there's a potential for earthquake faults on this site, you should slow down, stop, and look. That should have been the first trigger to say this is not a good site for us. But instead they moved on, and they moved on from that consultant to another consultant. And they moved from consultant to consultant to consultant until they finally got the one that they wanted, which said there's no problem where you have the buildings. Well,
to date, no one's been indicted, and $175 million has been spent. Now they're going to start tearing down some of the buildings there, and they're going to spend $110 million more. Do you think that who's responsible for prosecuting? If the district attorney puts out a report that's clearly in conflict with everything else that you and the others on the task force found, what alternative is there?
Well, at this point, I don't know what the alternative is. Probably a lot of the statute of limitations have passed. I think the real alternative is that the school shouldn't be built. It should be torn down. The state and the school district should have learned a huge lesson from it, and it should never happen again. I think the $100 million is minimal because as long as that school is a school and it sits on a contaminated site, it's going to have to be monitored.
Where do we go from here? What do you think? Will they be successful, or do you think that there's enough concerns here that the community should still proceed with caution here.
Well, I think the community needs to be outraged by this. I think the community needs to demand that school not be built.
Okay.
Controversial, informative, entertaining, fulldisclosure.net, the news behind the news.